Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Dattitude this Friday morning, my weekly venture with Jeff Duncan. We got all kinds of things to talk about, Dunk, so we're going to spare the small talk and get right into it. How does that sound to you?
We're not going to talk king cakes again?
Well, I mean, where do you go after you go? So, yeah, we will, actually, real quick. After Dong Fong, what's your second choice?
Well, I'm going to go try this morning, as a matter of fact, a little bit later this afternoon. I'm going to try Bywater Bakery. I hear they're really good there, but I've never actually bought my own there. I've just tried one before. So I'm hearing they have what do they call it? A Chantilly king cake.
Chantilly, yeah. Okay.
It's supposed to be amazing. So I'm going for that.
All right. Well, we're gonna ask you about that next week. Okay. We got some comments already here. We will be taking your comments all this morning. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, you can just type them in the comment stream. If you're on Twitter, you're going to have to tweet at me, at Jim Derry Jr. We will read your comments and questions on the air. It should be a fun morning. We've already got a bunch of people. Oh, Joanne Palumbo says, Bywater Chantilly is the best. I have not had that one. So yeah, I don't get the whole Dong Fong thing. I mean, I love it.
I'm starting to wonder about your taste if you don't get Dong Fong.
It's just they're better. They're better. It's like putting butter on top of a cinnamon roll. That's a whole nother story. I don't know. Tired Eyes, hello. We welcome you this morning. All right, Jerry's not happy. Jerry says Mickey Loomis needs to be fired now. All right, let's not go that far, okay? But I do want to get into. I want to start. We're going to talk about Sean Payton in a little bit. We're going to talk about the Pelicans for a little bit. We're going to give our NFL playoff predictions in a little while. But I want to start with the one that befuddles me. And the reason why Jeff Duncan and I work so well together is I am like, oh, and Jeff Duncan is nice and calm and smooth and will give you the reality of the situation. So I'm going to get into my right off the bat. Pete Carmichael, I don't understand it at all. Okay, first of all, I didn't even think he even wanted the damn job. And so not only did I thought he would just ride off into the sunset on his own, or at least take a smaller step back, we now find out that he's going to be the offensive coordinator again next year. What in the hell makes this franchise, and I love Mickey. Mickey Loomis is a phenomenal general manager. I know people give him grief sometimes, but I think he's phenomenal, not just because he's been on the show. I really do. I think he knows what he's doing. He's always known what he's doing. He can do things that other general managers cannot do. But what makes this franchise think that Pete Carmichael is the answer at offensive coordinator?
Well, it's definitely surprising. I think they actually did look into making a change there, but I don't think they found anyone that they really were enamored with that they felt like could come in and make a big difference here. I don't think they wanted to completely overhaul the offensive system, which kind of surprised me. I thought they might try and get real bold and overhaul the offense, but I don't think they want to make that. I think basically what we're seeing here, and this is what my fear was, I wrote a column after the season saying that, they can't delude themselves and live in denial and think because they had that little 3-game winning streak that they're right there, that they're close. Yeah. That's what I think they think. And I think it's going to be a failed experiment here by maintaining the continuity. There's a saying in business that, just good enough is not good enough. And that's what I feel like they're saying right now is we're just good enough. We can get in the playoffs and go 10-7, and that'll be good enough to pacify the fans. And I don't know if that's accurate. But I do think they looked into making a move there. And I think they're still going to make some changes. Obviously, Dan Rochar is not coming back. They're going to bring in somebody to replace him. And it wouldn't surprise me. I don't know this, but I think it's being discussed. It wouldn't surprise me if Pete is not calling plays next year. That might go to whoever they bring in.
That would change my opinion on things.
Or Ronald Curry, who called plays in preseason last year. They could make a change there. Then you've got Pete basically doing what he does best, which is, putting together the game plan, drawing up, how they're going to coordinate the game plan, but someone else calling the plays.
See, that would change my opinion a lot because I think Pete is a great assistant coach. I don't know him from Adam. I've never met him. I've never talked to him. So it's most of the guys that we talk about here, I've met, I've talked to at some point along the way. I don't know why, but I've never run into Pete Carmichael. I've never talked to him. So it's hard for me to sit here and talk bad about him. But I just, you watch this offense and the last, 3-game winning streak aside, let's look at the reality of this thing. The last 6 weeks of the season, they did not score more than 21 points in any single game. It was all defense. And 8 of the last 9 games, they didn't score more than 21 points. They had 127-point output against a Rams team that at the time looked like they were just giving up. It was before they got Baker Mayfield. They were in a really bad way. And so it just bothers me. And, the gaming grunt has a great comment here. Excuse me. I think the Saints are just looking to focus on next off season and not this off season. Gaming grunt, I heard a comment. I actually heard someone say yesterday, one of my friends say that the Saints are tanking already. I mean, no one tanks in January.
They don't tank. That's not the way they think.
This is what they think is best for their franchise. I think they're wrong. But so I guess the long-winded thing of what I'm trying to say is if what you're saying is right, if someone else comes in and calls the plays, I might feel a little bit differently about this because I think he isn't a good assistant coach, but they have got to make some significant changes personnel-wise, both in the coaching staff and on the field.
Well, they're not making those changes on the coaching staff. I can tell you that. I mean, now they may have some if Ryan Nielsen on the defensive side goes to Atlanta, and if Chris Richard ends up getting a job somewhere, they're going to have a coordinator change on the other side of the ball, not the offensive side of the ball. But I do agree with you that they have to change some of the direction they're going offensively. I think they have to find an identity, and maybe the new person they bring in. I know that they did look around because I talked to some people who were basically charged with trying to go out and identify some candidates and for the Saints. And so they were looking, but they just didn't like what they saw. And, I think part of the thinking is that this offense was so riddled with injuries. The loss of their number one receiver. They had some offensive line issues. And we see around the league, that's not uncommon. I mean, basically, Joe Lombardi lost his job because they couldn't run the ball
right.
in L.A. Well, I mean, their whole offensive line was injured, so same thing happened to Byron Leftwich in Tampa. I mean, their offensive line was riddled with injuries. They were really one-dimensional. They couldn't run the ball. Well, they had no offensive linemen. So you see a pattern here, and I think the Saints felt like, we don't want to get into that same pattern of just turning it over. We think our continuity is a strength of ours while everyone else is overhauling. We're going to zig while everybody else is zagging. That's kind of how I think they felt about this. Could be wrong. The thinking, I'm not endorsing it. I'm just trying to explain probably, in my conversations with people in the facility what the thought process was.
Shout out to JJ, who I showed his comment a little bit. He talks to me on Twitter. We kind of go back and forth. We appreciate JJ and the gaming grunt. He says they're not going to tank, but look, you talk about running the ball, and all I can think of in my head is Jim Morris saying, "We didn't run the ball. We didn't try to run the ball." I mean, it's one thing to not run the ball. And Byron Leftwich, you talk about him. Remember, he was a big head coaching candidate. He went from being a head coaching candidate to being fired. And I don't think he's going to get another offensive coordinator job. I do think he's young. He will have a chance to work his way back into favor somewhere. He will get another offensive coordinator job at some point. I don't necessarily think it'll be next year. But the problem I have with Pete Carmichael is kind of the same one I had with Byron Leftwich. Okay, so your offensive line has had issues. You don't run the ball, but you don't try to run the ball. It's like some of these defenses they were playing this year screamed Alvin Kamara and Taysom Hill. And yes, they used them at times and used them effectively, but to me, they got away from it quickly and easily and sometimes didn't even try to. So to me, there was no creativity. And I know we're spoiled. We've gone through 16 years of Sean Payton and Drew Brees. I get all that. But there was just, to me, except for maybe 3 or 4 games here or there was just no creativity and there was no continuity. The consistency was absolutely vacant. I mean, some games I thought, okay, he knows what he's doing and he did a good job. And then the next game he'd come out and they'd score 10 points and stink it out.
Well, look, I think in defense of Pete and what the Saints are trying to do, I mean, this is life in the league when you don't have a great quarterback.
Yeah,
I mean, when you're playing the Saints, Jim. I mean, you're the defensive coordinator. You're the defense. What are you going to do? You're going to take away Alvin Kamara and Taysom Hill. You're going to play the run. And so good offenses have to be balanced to take advantage of that. The Saints really don't have that in the passing game right now. They don't have a quarterback that people fear. They have a couple receivers that can, get separation, but they're not, dominant players. So people play the run against the Saints. That's why it's hard to run, and that's why he would get away from it, because for years that's what they were able to do. They would go into a game, see how they were going to be defended by the opponent, and then attack that game plan. And they had the balance to do it. They don't have it now. So, I was on Bobby Hebert's show last night. We were talking about before we came on air. And Bobby was really a staunch defender of Andy Dalton. And I get it. I think Andy Dalton played well within his limitations. But the fact is, nobody's scared of Andy Dalton when they come into the Superdome. Nobody. And they'll live with every once in a while him hitting Rashid Shaheed. They'll live with that because they don't want to let the Saints get control of the game with that running game. So that's the problem you're going to have if they run it back with Andy Dalton.
Kirk and Dustin, you got questions about Sean Payton. We're going to get to Sean Payton in just a little bit, so don't think I'm ignoring you. I will show you questions in just a moment when we get to that segment, which is coming up after this. And by the way, Dattitude here with Jeff Duncan, as we do every Friday at 9:15. We are going to be taking your comments and questions. We'll probably be on there until at least 10, maybe 10:15. We'll see how it goes. And neither one of us has anything super important after this, so we might be on for the full hour this morning. We'll see how it goes. Look, I just don't. Quarterback to me is the number one issue on this team. Carlos says quarterback is not the problem. I couldn't disagree more. You look at the teams that are in the playoffs right now, Dunk, that are still in the playoffs. And to me, other than Trevor Lawrence, who is a work in progress, I guess, and I think he's going to have a rude awakening this weekend. Spoiler alert. But other than Trevor Lawrence, you look at all the other quarterbacks in the league, Brock Purdy's 6-0. So, I mean, all these teams have good, solid quarterbacks that have led them to where they are. And even Dak Prescott, who has had his moments and it hasn't had a look great last week. But, I mean, go through the list. Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, all these teams with a legitimate chance to win the Super Bowl, what do they all have in common? They all have a great quarterback, or what I think is a really good quarterback. We'll see about Purdy. I know it's early on him, but the Saints have got to address that issue. And the fact that they're staying with Pete Carmichael scares the ever-living hell out of me. That they're, you know what? Let's ride with Andy Dalton one more season.
Yeah, look, I think the answer there might be to try and draft a young quarterback in this draft, and then you run it back with Dalton as your bridge quarterback. And when your long-term solution is ready, I mean, you take the Kenny Pickett approach, right? I mean, they had Mitch Trubisky there to be the bridge, and then they turned to Pickett about week 6. I could see the Saints doing something like that, but they're going to have to pay Andy Dalton a little bit more. I think he made $3 million last year. He's not gonna accept that, so they're going to have to pay more. And that's the problem they've got right now is they've got such cap issues, and they still have to sign guys like Carl Granderson and Caden Ellis. I think they want Onyemata back. I mean, I don't know how they're going to do it and address the quarterback position. That's why I think they almost have to go into the draft thinking about a quarterback because of the salary cap situation.
Here's a good question, because this kind of leads into one thing I wanted to ask you about. Sidney Billiot says, I said all along, I think he means last year when Doug Peterson came in for a visit, I was really hoping that they would have hired him, and the Saints trying to do is spend the least money as possible. I don't necessarily think they're trying to spend the least money as possible, because a coach doesn't affect your salary cap. But a question that I do have, I'm not railing on Dennis Allen, and I know that we've talked about how loyal this team is, but why didn't the Saints go more? Why were they just set on Dennis Allen from the get-go? Again, I'm not saying Dennis Allen was the problem, but why were they set from the get-go and didn't have – it seemed to me that they didn't have an open mind when it came to the coaching situation, that from the day Sean Payton said, I'm out of here, Dennis Allen was going to be the next coach.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think they went into it saying someone's going to have to knock our socks off and be clearly better than Dennis Allen. That Dennis Allen, they knew what they had in him. I mean, basically, he'd been with them 12 years. So they knew so much about how he operated that he had a huge head start on everybody else. And it was going to take, something pretty surprising, I think, to unseat him from that front runner position. Doug Peterson would have been a great hire. I mean,
absolutely.
I love Doug Peterson. I think he's a great coach. And, we can question that for sure as we see how Dennis Allen's tenure goes. I think it's certainly a fair game to question that hire. But you have to remember, like Mickey Loomis, again, values continuity and stability. I mean, we should all know this by now. This is part of the track record. And some people have brought up in social media, I do think, a good point, and that is you value continuity and stability when it's working, and it worked for 15, 16 years because you had Drew Brees and Sean Payton. That's, I think, a valid point. Are we seeing, the loss of those two generational leaders, an organization that's struggling to find its footing, find direction, find vision? I think that's a fair assessment.
But, here's one thing. You talk about continuity, Dunk. But to me, wouldn't continuity have been somebody like Doug Peterson, who is probably the closest thing out there, in my opinion, to Sean Payton, an offensive-minded coach who could have come in and even if it were Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton, whoever, I mean, it to me, that's the way continuity would go, not necessarily just because Dennis Allen's already on your staff, the complete opposite of Sean Payton. I mean, Doug Peterson, look, Dennis Allen is a fantastic defensive coordinator, but I'm not sure that he's the head coach yet. This is what this team needs at this time. So to me, continuity doesn't necessarily mean it's inside the building. Loyalty and continuity are two different things.
Well, but I mean, if you bring in Doug Peterson, I mean, he's going to want to run what he runs. I mean, he's going to want to run his offensive system. He's going to have a defensive coordinator in mind. He may keep Dennis Allen in that situation. They could have maybe made that a stipulation, but a lot of coaches won't take a job if they think they're being forced to keep certain coaches. So the continuity, I think, that we're talking about here is the Sean Payton culture and system. And that's what they value. They believe in that formula. It's worked here for years. But I think why it worked had a lot to do with Sean Payton and Drew Brees more than the X's and O's and the offensive defensive systems.
I think Chris Lundy's being a little tongue-in-cheek here. I mean, I hope so. When he says that's why Pete should have been the head coach. I mean, maybe he's not joking. I don't know. I'm not sure. JJ, who's been back and forth with me on Twitter the last 4 to 5 months, says he wants to thank you for the book, Dunk. Amazingly done and an entertaining read. We're going to talk about your book before we go off the show, by the way. I do want to get to that. I do want to get to the Sean Payton part of the show. And I do have a couple questions that I've kind of sped through and didn't run yet. So let's talk about Sean Payton. And you wrote a column earlier this week about it could be a win-win situation for both Sean and for the Saints. I agree with you, but I think we're getting to a point now, before I get into the questions, I think we're getting to a point now where it's a little weird. I think it's Houston, Denver, or nowhere. I think Houston, even though they're plus 800 on DraftKings, by the way, if you want to go bet that, $10 to win $80 for him to be the Texans coach. I think that if he's going to go anywhere, it makes the most sense for the Saints, and it makes maybe the second most sense for Sean Payton. What do you think about Houston as a possibility? But I got to be honest, if I were going to bet on this at all, I'd say it's more likely than not he doesn't coach in 2023.
Yeah, I think, from my reporting this week, that's the way he was leaning going into this interview process. Now, we all know when you get in front of people, you can get swayed. Certainly Sean Payton can be an impulsive guy.
Yeah.
I personally would not rule out Carolina. I would not rule that out.
I wouldn't either. I should have said that.
Yeah, he's meeting with David Tepper today in New York. And David Tepper is a former hedge fund guy. I mean, billionaire, very aggressive. I could see him and Payton hitting it off. I mean, what Sean wants, just in my dealings with him over the years, he wants to win like every coach. That's the number one thing to them. That's why when he says ownership and management are the most important things, he means it, because that's how you win in the NFL. You get a deep-pocketed owner that's aggressive, that's willing to open up the purse strings. He doesn't want to be fighting. I mean, Sean's a handful to deal with
Yeah.
as a head coach because he's constantly trying to win every year. And at some point, you run out of that ability, but he wants an owner that's going to be as aggressive as him. And I think guys like Rob Walton, who's I think net worth is $61 billion. Think about that. Gail Benson's $2 billion, $3 billion. This guy's $61 billion. So we're talking about a different stratosphere.
But is there really a difference, Dunk, between $2 billion and just think about it from our perspective? If you had $2 billion in the bank and you had $61 billion in the bank, would your life be any different?
No, probably not. But the point is, it shows you just how deep his pockets are. Like he's
I wouldn't know the difference between $2 million and $61 million.
He's not going to blink at paying $25 million to Sean Payton. He's not going to blink at that. And,
okay, no, I completely get you. I'm being a little facetious.
No, I'm just saying. But the other thing is, they got there. They got that wealth by being uber aggressive in business. There's a difference when you get to that level of wealth and how you got there, as opposed to just buying an NFL team and it accumulating wealth. That's the wealth of the Bensons was all tied up in them owning the Saints, and then they were able to use that as that's their number one asset. And I've long, our old boss, Doug Tatum. Doug used to always have a point about these pro sports owners. What you want is, if you're a fan, you want your owner to have made his or her money somewhere else, and that the pro team is basically like a hobby, not the number one asset you have, because then you manage it with a little more conservatism, I think, because that's your baby. Whereas if you're Mark Cuban, you made billions doing something else. The NBA team is your kind of your hobby. You're willing to throw money around because you're making your money somewhere else, if you get what I'm saying. So
I do.
Yeah. So anyway, but back to the point of Sean Payton, I think there's a real strong possibility he doesn't take a job somewhere because there's really no perfect landing spot right now. They all have cons. There's pros to each one of them. But I do think Carolina becomes interesting. If he goes there, I think the Saints will get higher compensation. So that's a win for the Saints. But it could be a big loss in the long run because all of a sudden you're going to get Sean Payton twice a year. And if he starts beating the Saints consistently with the Panthers, not only are some Saints fans going to be tarnished toward Sean Payton, they're never going to hold it against Mickey Loomis for letting him go there. And so I think that's a lose-lose for both Sean and Mickey.
Yeah, one thing that I saw last night, Sean Fazan was talking about on the Final Bet show on Fox, and I think he's right. The problem with Carolina and the reason why I don't think he's going to go there, besides the points that you mentioned, and it kind of goes along with what you were saying as well, I think the price for Carolina would be double what it would be for anyone else, right? So, yeah. I mean, Carolina, to me, you talked also earlier in the week about, would it cost to get John Gruden 2 number ones? That's not happening. That was 20 years ago.
No,
it's not. They're not going to get the same thing.
That was kind of a one-off too. It was an outlier. It was an Al Davis thing. I think. Yeah. Look, what Mickey's
but
doing.
Still, what my point is that it's going to cost twice as much. I don't think Carolina's going to be able to pay, not so much with money, with capital. I'm talking about with what it's going to take picks wise and personnel wise to get this thing done. I just don't see that happen.
What I think could happen here, and this is the thing that no one's talked about so far, is they're becoming basically a standoff between Loomis and Payton, where Payton says, I'm going to Carolina. We're not paying 2 first-round picks. Mickey's saying, I want 2 first-round picks. And what are you going to do? I mean, at some point it would go, I think, probably to the commissioner's office. There'd be an arbitration. This is what happened with the Jets and the Patriots. Paul Tagliabue had to arbitrate that and basically come up with a solution. I think it could get to that. We got 2 headstrong guys that both have competing agendas. And I don't think it's going to get resolved very easily because, I'm in the middle of this thing. I've talked to both sides, and they're both adamant about what they want out of this thing, and it's not the same thing. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
Well, I mean, the commissioner can jump in if he wants, but Mickey Loomis holds the cards. Let's don't fool ourselves here. If Mickey Loomis doesn't think it's a good deal for the New Orleans Saints, and God bless him. I mean, I told you what I think. I don't agree with Pete Carmichael staying on, but I trust in Mickey Loomis, and he's a business guy. He's going to do what's best for Gail Benson and the New Orleans Saints. And what's best for the New Orleans Saints might not be best for Sean Payton. Too bad. Sorry, Sean. That's just
I
the
just
way that
don't
it
know
is.
if it's that simple. Like, I don't know enough about it. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying I'm right. I don't know that if Sean Payton and David Tepper say, we want to make this happen, we want Sean Payton to be the coach of the Carolina Panthers, and they say we're not going to pay two for. I don't know if it's that simple as, well, you can't coach the Panthers. I mean, if he goes out there and, I mean, what if he just starts showing up to
Under
work?
contract. Do they want to
I
go
know,
to
but I'm
court?
just telling you. I mean, it happened. It happened in this Parcells deal. They had to get the commissioner involved. I'm sure
That was 25 years ago.
there was precedent there. You think that the Jets didn't have the same mentality in the Patriots deal? You know, you see what I'm saying? I mean,
if he wants to push it that far, I think he's going to lose, but maybe he will. I mean, I agree. You're a headstrong. He's a headstrong guy. Okay. Going back to a question we had about 20 minutes ago, and I'm sorry, I'm just getting to it, Kirk, but we weren't talking about that at the time. Kirk Babcock asked, what are the chances of Sean ending up in Arizona? We have both talked about this before. I think I feel a little bit more strongly about it than you do, but I think we both think that the chances of going to Arizona are slim, or at least I do.
yeah.
And I know he has a relationship with the Bidwells, but I just don't think that that's the kind of ownership group that Sean Payton wants to be a part of. That's just my opinion.
And here's the other thing I'll say. Look, the national reporters that are reporting on this story too, I know those guys really well. Ian Rappaport, Tom Pelissero, Adam Schefter. They're excellent reporters. I mean, they got to where they're at by being the best in the business. So I'm not saying this is a criticism. I'm just trying to explain to our viewers here. Those guys mainly get their information from agents.
Right.
There's always an agenda when an agent's involved.
100%.
So when you started hearing a week or so ago about Arizona and that was completely coming from Don Yee, Sean Payton's agent, stirring up interest, creating leverage for Sean with the other teams. That you just have to know these kind of things to understand. I never felt like that he was going to go to Arizona. Now, he may tomorrow meet with them and fall in love and go there, but right now the thinking internally is that they're the longest shot in the field, and I felt like that all along, but people started getting hot and bothered about him going to Arizona. I don't think he is a fan of Kyler Murray. He's never told me one way or the other, even privately, about Kyler Murray, but just knowing what Sean values in a quarterback. I mean, he has these 11 commandments of quarterback play from Bill Parcells. The number one item on the list is we don't want a clown or a comedian at quarterback. We want a field general that other men respect. Well, I mean, Kyler Murray, his teammates don't like him or respect him. They had to put a clause in the contract to get him to study and get ready for a game. That doesn't add up at all to what I think Sean Payton wants in his quarterback. And he's stuck with him. He's not going anywhere, and he's hurt. So I think when I talk about quarterback being a low priority for Sean, the only way it becomes a high priority, in my opinion, is when you have a bad situation. It becomes a negative, and but if you don't have a quarterback or you have a wide open situation like Houston, where you have Davis Mills, but really you can move on from him quickly, I think he's not intimidated to go there or Carolina and go find a quarterback. But I think it becomes a deterrent when you got a bad situation like Arizona.
Jim Derry, Jeff Duncan here on Dattitude on this Friday morning, as we are at 9:15 every Friday. After this is done, I will add my monologue, have a little segment with Uncle Big Nick as we make our NFL playoff picks, and I will put it on wherever you get your podcast. You can find Dattitude. You can listen to this show, my monologue with Uncle Big Nick. You can go back and listen to any of the past 132 episodes of Dattitude, and we've had some good ones. Duncan and I talked to Mickey Loomis back in June, and I actually thought that was a really good conversation. I went back and listened to it again. It's kind of interesting how you listen to it now, and it kind of plays out. I also talked to Jim Mora back in August. We had Ricky Jackson on the show, David Baker, former Hall of Fame commissioner, Pro Football Hall of Fame president, I should say. He's always a commissioner to me. So you can go back and listen to any of those shows. All right, moving on. I think Dustin had a very interesting question that we've kind of talked a little bit about, but let's get your take, because a lot of people want to know the answer to this. I know this is not important, he says, but why does Payton want to coach, but not here in New Orleans? Money would make Dennis Allen take a seat. That is a good question. Why does Sean Payton want to coach, but not in New Orleans.
That's not true. He would coach here. I wrote that. I mean, that's become a prevailing myth out there. I don't know where it's coming from. Sean Payton would love to come back and coach here. That's one of the – I think there's a little bit of a nuance to that, though. I think he would consider coming back. I know he's open to coming back here. That's why I wrote the column I wrote several weeks ago to let people know that that's a possibility. But the Saints are not interested in moving away from Dennis Allen after 1 year. Fundamentally, it goes against their philosophy of supporting. And then I think financially, I don't know exactly for sure what Dennis Allen's making. I've been told by one good source that it's $7 million a year for 4 years, but I haven't been able to confirm that with the second source, so I've never reported it. But that would mean the Saints would have to stroke him a check for $21 million. That goes against the way the Saints operate. They can pay that. Don't get me wrong, they can, but it's not what they want to do. They don't do things like that. I mean, they moved off Stan Van Gundy after 1 year with the Pelicans. That was very unusual, and they did it.
But they didn't have any loyalty to Stan.
Yeah, and they did it because internally it was a mess. It's not a mess with the Saints internally.
Yeah.
But I believe wholeheartedly, if you have a chance to get Sean Payton, you get him. I wrote that a month ago. I still stand by it. I think Sean Payton is one of the greatest coaches in NFL history.
I agree.
If you get him in the building, he knows the roster. He knows everybody involved. He's rebuilt this thing a couple times. He could rebuild it again, and he's open to it. But you have to go get him. You can't just like say, okay, we're gonna. You have to. It has to be two sides to this relationship. But Sean Payton didn't leave here because he hated New Orleans, because he wanted to.
Why did he leave?
He left. He got burned out. I don't know how many times I have to tell people this. He got burned out from coaching, and now he's back. He's recharged. It doesn't take long. It took him a year. A year away is a long time to get away. You can only golf so much. You can only travel so much, and he might sit out another year. And look, I would not close that door if he sits out another year at Fox.
That was my next question.
Doesn't work out here with Dennis Allen. I do not think it's impossible that he would come back and coach here in the future. But there's a little bit of tension right now over this courtship of Sean Payton, and I think that's interesting to see how it plays out.
Well, that you answered my next question before I even answered it, and I think that maybe Mickey is maybe in the back of his mind he's holding on to, if we go through another year with Dennis Allen, if we have another 6-11 type season, what's to say that you don't go into next year and you're like, you know what, I'm still holding the cards. What they're going to get in return would be less next year than they're going to get this year. They would still get something decent. Don't get me wrong.
Now, that's a very interesting thing, because I can tell you the Payton camp believes, and they're leveraging with all their might right now. That's their leverage. They believe the compensation will go down to like 1 third-round pick.
No way.
Out next year.
No
I don't agree with them in that regard.
Saints wouldn't give him up for that.
I can tell you Mickey doesn't think that. Mickey thinks he's going to get just what he would be worth this year, next year. And I kind of agree with Mickey. Why would it go down? I don't understand it.
Yeah, it's going to go down a little bit because I think the Saints' leverage isn't the same. They got a 2-year hold on right now. And next year to have a 1-year hold, a team could say, you know what, we're going to do just what we're saying, and talking about maybe the Saints hold on and say, let's see what happens next year. We might want to bring Sean. He might not want to come back next year. He may say, screw you. I'm not.
I think he would come back in a heartbeat. I mean, he knows what he's got here. Like, I think there's been a lot to play out. This whole thing with people talk about the Miami thing last year with Tom Brady and that report about Pro Football Talk. I don't know for sure exactly what happened there, but what I've been able to gather, it wasn't Sean Payton and Tom Brady trying to walk away and go to Miami. It was Miami hearing that Sean Payton was having serious thought about stepping away from the Saints. He was down in Cabo San Lucas,
right,
basically deciding his fate for 2 weeks. And the owner of the Dolphins said, well, you know what? If this guy's thinking about like leaving the Saints, we're at least going to put a call in and see if he's open to coming here. That's how it went down. It wasn't this, arranged thing of Sean and Tom Brady going to walk away. That wouldn't have happened. Tom Brady was under contract with the Bucs, and Sean Payton was under contract with the Dolphins. I mean, with the Saints. So it was. I don't know where this has gotten twisted. That this was all some kind of conceived thing for Sean Payton to go to Miami. As I understand it, from everybody I've talked to, that wasn't the case.
No, I mean, I don't think he was ever going to Miami. And I mean, I don't know. This going to play itself out. But to think that Sean and Mickey could be button heads, I mean, these guys worked together in sync for 16 years. And one of the things that Mickey was great at, and people may call it a negative if they want, but Mickey always had the last word, but he deferred to Sean way more times than not. He trusted in Sean Payton enough personnel-wise. Sometimes it was a good thing. Sometimes it wasn't as good as people think it was, I believe. But that's why he had it so good here. And wherever Sean goes in the future, he's going to have a general manager that's flexible. Another reason why I don't think he's going to go to Arizona. That team's a mess right now. I mean,
well, I heard they did not like that they went and hired a general manager.
Exactly. They hired a general manager without consulting a coach. To me, that rules Sean Payton out right there.
Yeah, I think it's a long shot that he goes there. Wouldn't surprise me if he takes a job, if he hooks up with Ryan Pace, who was here with him. I know they have great respect for each other. He was the GM in Chicago. That's a guy Sean could work with for sure. Someone like Ryan Pace, I could see going with him.
Yeah.
Jeff Ireland, I think, is a possibility too. That would be a huge loss for the Saints.
Yeah, that's what JJ just said. He's the number one guy the Saints can't lose is Ireland. I actually agree with that. To me, and we'll go back to it before we move on, I think the only place that really makes sense for both teams in the grand scheme of things is Houston. That's why I would, if I were going to bet, I don't know if I'm going to bet it or not, but this is a semi-betting show.
What's the
plus 800 at Houston? And he's like plus 350 at Denver. I don't think Denver has what the Saints need to get that done. The only way that would work to me is if he goes to Denver, if they're willing to do it. And I don't think any team's going to be willing to do this. But to me, if he goes to Denver, their first round pick is San Francisco's first round pick. And I think San Francisco can win the Super Bowl. So even if they don't win the Super Bowl, you're talking about a pick in the very high 20s or in the 30s.
Would you do it for what about a second round pick from Denver and then next year's first? And gamble that they're going to stink again next year. And
yes, I would. Well, I mean, they would have to give us the first round this year, which is basically, like I said, a high second round. It's the same thing.
That's going to happen. I think. I
guess it's not that much different. Their second round pick is going to got to be fifth or sixth of the second round.
I think that would be a possibility from Denver. You get their second round this year, which will be pretty high, and then you get, that's right. They don't have
don't have their own first pick. They traded it to Seattle. Seattle has it.
You can't do that. Just thought that through. They traded it away. Yeah, you're right.
I just don't think that's a possibility.
Say this. I've done more media appearances on Denver TV, radio, and blogs in the last 48 hours. They are eaten alive with the thought of Sean Payton going there. Fan base is very excited.
I just think Houston's makes sense because I think he'd want to go there. I think he could draft a quarterback. He's going to good chance he gets Bryce Young. And you think about the possibilities there. I think the ownership is receptive to him kind of doing what he did here. And the Saints getting the number 12 pick of the draft would work for the Saints. So to me, it's Houston or nowhere. That's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't go anywhere. I mean, look, it is always the possibility that teams look at this and say, I think everyone thinks it's just a slam dunk that someone's going to hire him. But if you're, say, Denver, and we're getting DeMeco Ryans, an up-and-coming rising star coordinator, you might look at it and go, we can pay DeMeco Ryans $8 million a year, not $25 million. We don't have to give up any draft capital. And I think we could be pretty good with DeMeco. I could see an owner saying that. There's a lot you have to give up to get Sean Payton in the building. So
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I don't think it's beyond the possibility that everybody passes on him.
I think if Houston gets a chance to hire him, they're going.
I think they'd be smart to, for sure. And they've got so much draft capital. You're right, JD. They make a lot of sense for the Saints because they can give up the number 12 pick, which would be great for the Saints, and they still have multiple first-round picks in the future that they can lean on to rebuild.
We're going to finish the show talking about the NFL playoffs, but I want to spend 5 to 10 minutes, and I know a lot of you came to listen about football, but I think it's important. We didn't talk about the Pelicans last week, and I think it is important today to talk about them because, Dunk, and again, this is going to be a 5 to 10 minute conversation. If you want to leave a comment about them, you're more than welcome to. We'll take it here. But the Pelicans are in a weird situation right now, as to me, for the first time all season long, the injuries to the two stars are finally catching up with them. They've run through a gauntlet of teams, and you see the schedule. You know, they lost to the Heat, who are playing much better right now. They lost to the Cavaliers early on Martin Luther King Day, and then last week had a tough time with the Pistons. But the schedule coming up, and I was talking about this on Bayou Betch yesterday, and I haven't looked still. But their schedule in March and April must be pretty darn easy because they're running through a gauntlet right now.
Yeah. And I don't think that game tonight is going to be any piece of cake. Orlando's got a lot of good young talent. That's a fun team to watch.
Probably the rookie of the year.
Yeah, that's a fun team to watch. I really like watching them play, and they bring it every night because they're young and hungry. I think that's going to be more difficult. But I loved Christian Clark's story this week. I think somebody finally got it out there about Brandon Ingram. I mean, it's an issue. People want to say, he's hurt. I get it, but he was hurt last year with like 7 different injuries. And now he's got this toe that's been lingering. And I can tell you internally, it's an issue. It's an issue with the Pelicans that basically it's up to Brandon Ingram when he plays. He's been cleared by the medical staff. So it's just up to him. And you're just kind of at the mercy of Brandon Ingram. And these star players these days, it's not just the NBA. It's a similar situation with Mike Thomas with the Saints. They all have their own people now. They all have their own trainers, their own.
Where have we gone, Jeff Duncan? Where have we gone?
It's so everyone's in their ears. And look, there's a lot of money on the line. And, players understandably want to look out for their own best interest because teams will definitely push you through injuries and it's not your best interest. So I get this complicated thing. But right now, Brandon Ingram, the fact is missed 26 year with injuries. He's missed more than that already this year. I have a hard time thinking that this is going to be your guy, your bell cow that you hang your hat on going forward. I know everybody loves Brandon Ingram out there, but to me, the alpha, the number one guy on this team has to be Zion Williamson, and they need to get him back on the court and healthy as soon as possible.
And before we move back to the NFL and talk about the playoffs, I mean, what scares me about Zion is I think he wants to play as soon as he can get out there. That's what I believe. But we have seen this movie before, and we're going to find out a lot more probably next week. The 3 weeks on Zion is just about up. But look, we've seen him have injuries in the past where they say it's only going to be a few weeks, and it turns into a few months or even a season. What's your worry concern there as far as when he might come back?
Well, I'll be shocked if he's back before the All-Star break. I think your point about the schedule being tough is accurate because they got to kind of tread water, I think, and to get to the All-Star break, get everybody healthy and get them on the court and make a run. But, this people tend to think the All-Star break is like the midway point of the season. It's not.
That's right. We've already passed that.
Yeah, it's like almost 3/4 of the way through the season. So you don't have a lot of time to make up ground. They're losing a lot of ground here. I mean, the West is so competitive, though. The Pelicans are, I think, still going to be in the mix for a top seed if they can get those guys. But we see the potential. Look, they're going to make a move here. It's pretty obvious.
That was my next question before we get out of the Pelicans. Yeah, I think they'll make a move too. Where do you see them?
There's a couple places on the wing. They're going to look for either a swingman type player, either they could bring in defensive help there, or a shooter, a wing shooter like a Bogdanovic in Detroit right now.
Right.
Bogdanovic, I'm butchering his name, but
that's why I let you butcher it. I'm not.
Yeah, I know. Just my lips aren't working today. But like somebody like that, and look, they've got some guys. They're so deep right now. They've got some guys on the bench, I think, that are not happy in their roles, and they want to do right by them as well. So I think they're going to move some guys like a Devontae Graham, Willie Hernan Gomez. I know they like because he's a great guy for their bench. He's a culture guy, but he's a good player, and he's not hardly playing at all.
And that's kind of like last year, Dunk, when they didn't want to get rid of Josh Hart. Right. That was the last guy they really wanted to get. He was, pardon the pun, but he was kind of the heart and soul on the bench. And it, you could tell when he left, and when they played Portland again later in the year, that the hugs that they gave him. I mean, they didn't want to trade him, but sometimes you have to part with a player you don't want to trade with to get.
I mean, the other team's got to get something out of it. They're not
for sure.
These teams aren't dumb bunnies. They want to get something. And look, I think Kyra Lewis. I mean, he, unfortunately for him, he had that injury, and we saw the development of Jose Alvarado, and basically he got Wally pipped by Alvarado. He's now the main primary backup point guard. And
so did Devontae Graham.
Yeah, there's no really role now for Kyra Lewis. So he's an asset that you can trade because he was a former first-round pick, and he's a good player. So I could see them moving any of those guys. Jackson Hayes as well.
Be interesting to see. I think the trade deadline is coming up, a week and a half? Is that something along those lines? So that I think there'll be moves made there. All right, I want to go back to the NFL because we want to talk about playoffs. We got about 10, 12 minutes left in the show. We spent a lot of time talking about Sean Payton, and rightfully so. Dunk, but to me, this is my favorite weekend of the year, sports-wise. It encapsulates everything that, you got football from Saturday afternoon until Sunday night. You had it last week. It's my favorite 2 weekends, but I enjoy this round more than any other round. Next week is kind of a, it's hyped. It's super hyped, and sometimes the games don't live up to what they're supposed to live up to. Sometimes they do, but to have 4 games, interesting matchups, all of them I think are interesting. Even Jacksonville and Kansas City. Which one of these 4 are you waiting to watch the most?
Well, first of all, I want to call you out because you said that the Bucs were going to beat the Cowboys. And I did.
I was completely wrong.
The Cowboys are good, man.
How come you don't call me out when I'm right?
I just bring it out. I've been waiting till we got to this round because my boy Mike McCarthy, I'm so defiant toward him.
Well, we're going to get to Mike McCarthy in just a minute.
No one wants to give me credit. How many games does a guy have to win before people think he's a good coach? So anyway,
more than he has now.
Yeah, obviously, he's going to win another Super Bowl. Everybody's going to credit Dan
when
Quinn
he's 82 years old.
Yeah, but
it ain't going to be this year.
That game, I think you and I are on the same page there. I think whoever wins the Cowboys 49ers is going to be my pick to win the Super Bowl. I think that whoever wins that's going to beat Philly if they emerge.
100%.
100% sure they're going to beat.
I don't think they're going to win.
Yeah, I think they could easily lose that game. I don't like the way they're finishing the season. I think the Giants are well coached. They got a little momentum, and they can go into Philly with a us against the world mentality. I think if Philly gets behind early against the Giants, they're in trouble because I think the pressure and the expectations are going to just all come crumbling down on them. There's a lot of pressure on Philly, I think, because they're the number 1 seed. So the Giants, the Cowboys, 49ers, I'm high on both those teams. I would take the Cowboys in that just because you're getting the points, but it wouldn't shock me if the 49ers roll them. The 49ers are so good. I think Dak has to play well, can't turn it over. But in my column this week for the NOLA bets page, I think that game's going over because I think the defenses are so good, they're going to create some turnovers and some short fields there.
They're going to be turnovers.
Yeah, sure. I think both quarterbacks could throw some picks. So I think that game could score high. You notice this past weekend, JD, that a lot of the games went over. It was high scoring because it goes back to your point earlier. At this stage, you got really good quarterbacks, and great quarterback play almost trumps everything. When you get in this game, coaches lean on their quarterbacks, and you see just really high-level quarterback play. It's something the Saints don't have. I don't have a good feel for either of the AFC games, so I'd like to defer to you and what you feel about those games.
Do you and Mike McCarthy go spend a week in Miami and hang out by the pool drinking Mai Tais in March and April?
Keeps winning. These guys won 12 games back-to-back years. I don't think they were winning that many games before he got there. And I don't think the Packers are doing all that great now that he's left, are they?
The greatest accomplishment, I think, for Mike McCarthy is not winning a Super Bowl. It's turning Aaron Brooks into a quarterback. That's my opinion. But that was 20 years ago. More than that now. You're talking about 24, 25, 23 years ago. 2000, 1999, 2000. I don't get it. You know what I think too, and I've made a joke about this, but I think that maybe I just wanted Dallas to lose because I would have wanted to see what would happen had they lost this past Monday night, would Jerry Jones fire Mike McCarthy and then try to go after Sean Payton himself?
I don't think he would have fired him, but I think it is a possibility he might have done it. But we don't have to worry about that because they destroyed.
No, they absolutely did. I put way too much stock in the fact that I thought Tom Brady was going to have one last run in him. Tom Brady couldn't protect him. I don't care whether they couldn't protect. Tom Brady looks like he weighs 160 pounds. Something is not right with Tom Brady.
It's not – look, I think if you protect Brady, he's fine. I just think in this game, you've got to be able to protect. You got to have an offensive line. I mean, nobody can operate if you don't have an offense. Look at the Chargers when, Justin Herbert –
that's a whole different story.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if you don't have an offensive line, it's hard to do much of anything, But in going back to that, I just knew the other thing that I was big on that Cowboys game was everyone was talking about, they haven't won a road playoff game. Mike McCarthy's in trouble if he gets, they just they got tired of it. You could just tell they had that edge in that game and they were not going to lose. They just got tired of hearing about that stuff. And
right. Well,
sometimes that stuff matters, especially when you're a better team too. They're the better team, and it was a 2.5-point spread. To me, that was the best bet of the year, other than what you and I both agree on, was Georgia TCU, which was the greatest.
Oh, Georgia was like free. That was like free money.
We should have just taken our retirement.
We really should have. I mean, I should have, and more than getting somebody to paint their face. That's for sure. Jeff Duncan and Jim Derry here on Dattitude on Friday morning. I want to say what I think about the San Francisco game. Now, look, I was wrong last week, so I'm putting myself out there again to be wrong again. What they did last week means nothing, in my opinion. I mean, nothing. Tampa Bay is awful. They shouldn't have been in the playoffs. They were not even the best team in the NFC South. It just so happened that it worked out, and they kind of lucked their way into that position. To me, the Saints were the best team in the NFC South, but that's a whole different story. They didn't win the division. They would have showed up, to me, way better than Tampa Bay showed up last week. The Saints against Dallas would have been a much better game because the Saints would have played defense and forced Dak into some issues. I think that would have been a low score. And remember when they played a couple years ago and it was 12-10?
Yeah.
I think it would have been that kind of game had they played Dallas again. So neither here nor there. But that being said, the San Francisco 49ers do have a defense. I think Mr. Bosa is going to be in the face of Dak Prescott all day long. You talk about turnovers, and I agree. I think Brock Purdy has not seen a defense like this either.
Right.
I think both quarterbacks, it would not surprise me if both quarterbacks threw 2 interceptions this week. It's one of the most, well, they're all interesting, I think, even Jacksonville, Kansas City, but I am looking forward to that Dallas-San Francisco game, but I do think that San Francisco not only wins, but I think they cover, and I think they cover easily. I think it'll be close until halftime, but I think Dak's going to make a big mistake in the second half at some point, maybe in the third quarter, and I think their kicking woes could come back to bite them. We'll find out.
That's going to be fascinating.
Really
how
is.
Brett Maher recovers. I mean, that's fascinating. I do think – I don't know.
I'm shocked that they haven't made the change.
I'm not a big, prop bet guy or anything, but
yeah.
I do think Christian McCaffrey has a chance to have a monster game.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think they're going to lean on McCaffrey more than they've leaned on him in any. And not only that, I think Deebo Samuel is going to play a huge role in this game as well. They've been kind of backed off him because he had the injury. They didn't want to use him too much. We saw a little bit flashes of him last week. They didn't really need him to do too much against Seattle. I think Deebo plays a huge role. And then the other NFC game, I've said this a couple of times now. I think that, look, I know he's not even on the injury report any longer, but Jalen Hurts is not going to be able to do the things that Jalen Hurts is used to doing. That shoulders don't heal that quickly. So they're not going to let him just run all over the place. He's going to be hindered by that. And so I think the Giants are going to take advantage. This is a big Saquon Barkley game, in my opinion. Philly's got a great pass defense, but they haven't been great the last 5-6 weeks or so. Daniel Jones, I'm not just because of what he did last week, but I think this is a Saquon 22, 24, 26 carry. They've backed off. He's been running 16, 18 times a game. This is a game where I think he runs 24, 26 times. And I think the Giants have a chance to win this game.
No, I'm with you. And one other point is, we know Philly's got that incredible pass rush, right? 70 sacks this year.
Right.
Second most in NFL history. But Daniel Jones is a mobile guy. People forget. very athletic guy. I think he's going to be able to scramble around, buy some time. He's going to need to because the Giants line is not that great. But I think he's the kind of guy that can extend some plays with that great pass rush and make some plays downfield. I really like the Giants in this game.
I think he can do Jalen Hurts types things.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not Jalen Hurts. He's a different kind of quarterback. But, he showed it last week. He rushed for 78 yards, 79 yards.
No.
I think 70 of them were in the first half against Minnesota. Now, look, Minnesota's got a bad defense. There's a reason why they fired their defensive coordinator this week. So, again, it kind of like I can't be, a hypocrite. If you can't take a lot out of what Dallas did against Tampa Bay, then you can't take a ton out of what the Giants did against Minnesota. But the fact that the Giants, who weren't even supposed to be here, and what Brian Daboll has done in his rookie season, I mean, to me, the best rookie head coach is Sean Payton in 2006, in my opinion. I mean, back when Payton led the Saints to the NFC Championship game, nobody saw that coming. I mean, you can talk about Drew Brees all you want, but no one knew that Drew Brees was going to be Drew Brees back in 2006. That was a different thing. All right, to the AFC. Of course, everyone's going to talk about the Bengals and Buffalo, and rightfully so. But this Jags-Chiefs game could have a little wrinkle in it. I'm hearing there could be snow or, freezing drizzle or sleet or some kind of ice. It could be a weird weather game. So I kind of like the under. If I had to, I got Kansas City in a teaser league. I don't want to give spoiler alert to when I'm making a pick here in my podcast in just a few minutes. So I think Kansas City is the teaser leg of the year, getting 6 points, but you got to parlay them with something else. Maybe the Bengals at plus 11.5. I just think this is going to be a weird game because of the weather, but I don't think it matters to Patrick Mahomes.
No, I'm with you. I think the weather does, factor in there. But, Kansas City's been running the ball a little bit better. Isaiah Pacheco's kind of come on. Yes. I think they're going to be able to run the ball. I like Kansas City in this game, but I do think Jacksonville's kind of can go into that stadium with a, no one believes in us mentality. I mean, they have nothing to lose. No one.
Yeah, that's not going to work 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, look, I don't have a good feel for either AFC game, but I do think they're both going to be fun to watch. You got great quarterback play, all 4 quarterbacks. This is my column for tomorrow. A little spoiler alert. NOLA.com will be up here in about an hour. And I know you may have seen this on social media. All 8 quarterbacks this weekend are Manning Passing Academy alums. It's pretty amazing.
I did not know that.
Yeah, all 8 starters. Matter of fact, Jalen Hurts and Daniel Jones were at the MPA in the same year. They were like, roommates together. Now they're going against each other. But it's a testament to what that camp's prestigious reputation that all 8 guys starting were at the Manning Passing Academy.
Well, when you talk about quarterbacks, to me, there's no better quarterback matchup than the Bengals and the Bills. Joe Burrow, I think Joe Burrow, call me a homer if you want, but I think Joe Burrow has surpassed Josh Allen. If I had to pick one of these guys to lead me in the future, I'd take Joe Burrow over Josh Allen.
Yeah, I probably would too. And I wouldn't, dismiss Josh Allen at all, but
no, I'm not dismissing.
Joe Burrow's special leader. Joe Burrow's special guy. Now, what I have heard, and I haven't checked this, JD, you may know better than me, but I heard the offensive line for the Bengals kind of banged up.
It is messed up. They got 3 that are out this week. Well, they have 2 that are out for sure, and then I don't think they know whether Alex Kapp is playing or not. I don't know if he's been ruled out or not. I need to go look at that. It is a big-time concern, and they have issues in their defensive backfield. And we know, Saints fans know how much Eli Apple stinks, and he's hurt. So we saw it happen last week. Look, I don't think the Bengals are going to win this game. But that being said, as pairing them in a teaser leg with Kansas City, I would be shocked if they get blown out. And honestly, I think they're going to cover as well. 5.5 points. I didn't understand this line when it came out. I thought it would be more like 3.5. And we saw what the Bengals did in a very short window before DeMar Hamlin's injury. And again, this is a completely different situation, but I'm not betting against Joe Burrow. I'm just not.
Yeah, I'm with you. Joe Burrow is a special guy, special leader. He's going to know that he's got some protection issues. He'll adjust. Much the way Brady does down in Tampa. He'll get the ball out quick. So I think that game's going to be a really special one to watch. Obviously, the history with what happened here a few weeks ago, DeMar Hamlin, that's going to be a huge narrative in the game. And I think I'm a little worried though. Like Buffalo's a team has incredible. Like if you look at just the raw numbers, I mean they should be in the Super Bowl. I mean just their defense.
But we keep saying that about them.
No, but I'm a little worried about them. They're a little inconsistent. They're even inconsistent within a game. They're inconsistent, and Josh Allen turns it over a lot.
When's the last dominating game you saw him play? I mean, to me, the last one I remember off the top of my head is Week 2 against Tennessee.
Yeah,
I don't think that. I mean, they played well against Kansas City, obviously, but I have not seen them play. You know, people were talking about these sharps that I listened to after Week 2. They were talking about how go bet the farm on Buffalo. I mean, they're still a bargain. They were down like they were plus 300 to win the Super Bowl, 3-1 to win the Super Bowl. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't bet it then or whatever, but it wasn't like a fait accompli after 2 weeks. I mean, this team is you talk about issues. They could lose to anybody and beat anybody, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, that Minnesota game was a prime example, right? I mean, they had about 5 chances.
No business losing that game.
Yeah, had 5 chances to win that game and kept messing up in their own, self-inflicted wounds. To me, they're a little risky. I think Kansas City is clearly the team to beat in the AFC.
Well, and here's the reason. What scares me about Cincinnati is I think they could lose big. I don't think they're gonna. But if you crack that door open for Burrow, if you leave him with he's going to be. I mean, I hate to compare him to Joe Montana, but if he has a window at the end of that game, Cincinnati's going to. I'm going to go a lot better.
Yeah. Ask the New Orleans Saints about that, right?
Yeah, I mean, if he gets the ball at his own 20 with 2 minutes to go, and they're down 3, at the minimum, it's going in overtime. If he gets the ball down 3 at his own 20 with 2.5 to go, they're going to win the game. Joe Burrow's going to find a way to win the game. And they showed last year, he got sacked, I think, 8 or 9 times against Tennessee in the playoffs, and they still won. It doesn't make a difference to him. He finds ways to get out of that. That's why if there's any quarterback other than Patrick Mahomes who can deal with offensive line problems, I think it's Joe Burrow. And that's why I think they have a good chance to win.
But I do think they're going to have to get something out of their defense or special teams. I think.
For sure.
They need a little help because he just can't drop back. I mean, if they can't run the ball at all, I just think, but I agree with you. This game's close to the fourth quarter. It's very dangerous for Buffalo.
I have not seen Josh Allen put together a solid 60 minutes in a long time. I'm just saying that. And I know everyone, sharps keep using these numbers of all season long and average yards per play, and that's great. But, sometimes you have to look at what they've done recently. And what Josh Allen has done recently is turn the football over. So I don't care what defense is out there. If you keep turning the ball over and making mistakes, which is what he's done, I think you crack the door open for this Bengals team, and I think Joe Burrow is going to run through it. We will find out on Sunday. So I guess being said, I would think to go through it, I think Philly's going to win, but I think it's going to be a small win. I like the Giants with the points. I think San Francisco rolls over Dallas. I know my friend Jeff Duncan doesn't think that's going to happen. He's hanging out with Mike McCarthy. They're going to have Mai Tais. I mean, don't really.
Keep doubting them. Keep doubting them, Jay.
In about 4 or 5 days, you could probably go have your Mai Tais.
I like the over in that game. That's my bet of the weekend.
Okay.
Take the over Cowboys 49ers.
All right, and then in the AFC, I think KC covers. I don't think it's as easy as we've kind of been spewing. I think they cover, but I don't think they cover until later. But Patrick Mahomes against Trevor Lawrence. If you want to run to the window and bet on Trevor Lawrence, then you go for it. But I'm going to take Patrick Mahomes there. And then I like the Bengals with the points, but I do think the Bills win the football game. Going to be a fun weekend, Dunk. And next week we'll be talking about AFC and NFC championship games. That's always interesting.
Yeah, this weekend, I agree with you, is the best weekend of the year because the game, basically the pretenders have been eliminated and we got the real teams, the Super Bowl contenders, and you're going to have 4 great games, two days of afternoon, night football. It's going to be amazing and a great quarterback play. None of this stuff that we've had to watch all season long with the
That's the truth. Look, I'd even take Trevor Lawrence at this point. That's
yeah, I definitely would take Trevor Lawrence there. I don't know why you're against Trevor Lawrence. I think he's pretty good. I think he's played pretty well.
He's
the second half
average of the year. At best,
but I don't think he's Patrick Mahomes.
Did you see the first quarter and a half last week?
I know, but you also saw him lead that team back.
Well, you saw him lead that team back because Brandon Staley might be the worst coach in the NFL.
Whoa!
I mean, I'd personally rather, and I don't mean this to be mean. I'm not trying to be mean, but I'd rather Pete Carmichael be my head coach than Brandon Staley. I'm just saying that guy's.
I don't think Staley's that bad. I think Staley's okay.
He's a guy that reads off of an analytics card, and whatever his card says, whatever the computer spits out, that's what he's going to do. Forget feel or what you're supposed to do. And what's even worse is against Jacksonville, he didn't use the card. He did the opposite. He's like this risky coach doing all these weird things, and went complete conservative mode, and it bit him in the ass.
What was amazing was I think they got 5 turnovers and lost. I mean, that's
it's unfathomable. In any NFL game that you win the turnover battle by 5, honestly, somebody, I think that 4, if you had more than 4, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if the turnover battle was more than 4 over the last 40 or 50 years, the teams were like 319-0. I mean, you have to like literally try to lose the game, in my opinion. But that's a whole nother story. Don't get me started. See, you're gonna have a 2-hour show if you get me kickstarted.
So we gotta wrap this up. Let's get going.
Yeah. We're gonna wrap it up.
That Bywater Chantilly.
Exactly. I was gonna say we're gonna wrap it up right now because I want you to let me know how that Bywater cake is. There will be a quiz next Friday morning at 9:15.
You got it. Bywater Bakery Chantilly will be on the way, and maybe we'll have a little side bet between us on the Cowboys 49ers, and the loser has to buy a king cake.
I think that is a good bet right now. You want to do it right now?
Yeah, I'll take the Cowboys. You take the Niners, and the loser buys the other one a king cake of their choice.
I think that is a great deal, and the only stipulation is if you lose, you can't have Mike McCarthy buy it for you.
Okay.
All right. Talk to you next Friday, Don.
All right, bro. We'll talk to you.
We thank everyone for watching here on Dattitude. This has been, just by looking at the numbers, this is our best show, or at least our most watched show of the year. And so we thank you for joining us. We do this every Friday at 9:15. Dunk and I do. Every now and then we change it up a little bit. We change our time every now and then for things that happen, but we'll let you know in advance if we do that. So, and then we'll be back Dattitude next Monday. It's not live, but we'll have a show next Monday talking about all the games and maybe some more Saints. So join us there. We thank you for joining us. We will see you next week. Peace and love, my friends, and have a great weekend.